Hello and welcome back. Another Wednesday, another podcast. And this time you may have already noticed with the change of the my podcast artwork and the name on iTunes and Stitcher and SoundCloud, but I have kind of shortened the name of this podcast. It was originally Mo Money, Mo Houses, which went with the name of my blog. But now this podcast will now be known as the Mo Money Podcast. That's kind of what people were calling it anyway. And it's kind of fun. It's shorter to remember. And so, bam, is the Mo Money Podcast now. I'm, of course, your host, Jessica Moorhouse. Thank you so much for joining me today. I don't know if I've mentioned this on the podcast, maybe just on my blog and on social media, but I've kind of decided every 10th podcast episode, I'm going to do kind of a solo episode with, just me, obviously, because it's solo. And I'm going to be talking about a certain topic that has really affected me in my life and has something to do with personal finance. So you'll remember, episode 1 was me talking about my personal finance journey, and episode 10 was me talking about my experience moving from my hometown of Coquitlam and quitting my job and kind of risking it all to start a new life with my new husband at the time in Toronto. So this is episode 20, and I'm going to be talking about my experience with giving back and charity. I feel like it's a kind of an important topic when talking about money, but it may not always be the first thing you think about when you think about personal finance. But it's definitely affected me in my life, just some of the things that I've done in terms of charity and giving back and things like that. So I'm very excited to kind of share some of my stories with you in this episode. So I'm going to kind of start from my childhood because that's where it really began for me. I've mentioned a couple of times on my blog, but not on the podcast yet, that I do come from a religious background. I was raised Catholic on my mom's side. My dad is not religious, but my mom and that side of the family is. And so I always had a very interesting perspective in that front. My mom's side of the family is very in tune with the Catholic Church. And we used, growing up, I, had to go to church every Sunday. I did my, first confession and first communion and confirmation and all of those steps. And going through that experience growing up, it was always, very present in my life, the importance of charity, going to church every Sunday. My mom, I don't know what the proper name for it is called, but we'd get these envelopes that would last you for the year, and you'd, put a check or some cash in there, and then we'd have like the offering. So every, kind of near the end of the mass, we would, baskets would be kind of handed around, and then you put your envelope of money in there, and that would go to the church, and then the church would use that money to, I'm not going to exactly say where it went because I don't know the answer to that, but from what I understand, it went to the church, and then the church would, obviously pay the salary for the priest, and then all these other kind of charitable programs that it was involved in. And also another kind of thing that just popped in my head was for, my mom did that. I obviously didn't have any money growing up, so I didn't really contribute financially for that, but I always knew it was important to, carry that on as I, became an adult. But the one thing I do remember doing as like a kid and then a teenager was around Christmas, we'd always have these big Christmas trees at the church. And so there's always these kind of paper ornaments, and you'd pick one and it'd have someone's name on it. And basically it would be a person's name, and on the back it would have what they are asking for Christmas. And usually it was, a kid, and sometimes it would have their age on it. And it would say something like, I would like some new socks, or I would like a doll, or whatever. And so when I was a teenager, when started working, I, made that kind of a tradition for me. And so I would, pick an ornament, and then I would go to the store and buy whatever it was, and then put it in the basket for the next Sunday. And that was something that was really important to me. I mean, I really didn't have that much money, honestly, when I was like 15 and 16 working at whatever, a customer service job. But I knew it was really important for me to save up a little bit of money so I could afford that gift for that person, because it's, it's just important to, give back to those who are less fortunate. And I knew I was fortunate. I, didn't come from a wealthy family, but I knew I came from a fortunate family. now I'm going to kind of fast forward a few years. So, although I grew up Catholic, I was never super gung-ho. Maybe gung-ho is like the completely wrong term, but I was never super passionate and open about it. And part of the reason was honestly, when I would tell some people, some of my friends and some people I went to school with, they would make fun of me. It was awful, and it definitely affected me later on in life. But yeah, I was kind of embarrassed about going to church and all the kind of traditions and ceremonies that came with being Catholic. So I never really talked about it as I grew older, because I was embarrassed and I didn't want to get, I didn't want the attention. I didn't want to be made fun of anymore. But when I graduated high school, went to university, I kind of started making some new friends. And at the time, my older sister had quite a few friends that were part of this. It was called a college and career group. It was a Christian kind of Bible study. And they weren't Catholic. They were Protestant. And so that was kind of a bit different for me, because at that point, I had only been to a Catholic church. So I didn't really know what a Protestant church meant or looked like. But anyway, so she, I was starting to make new friends, and it was difficult my first year university. You're not with your normal high school friends anymore. You're in these big classes, and it's, a bit terrifying. And so she was going to the same university as me. And so she invited me to this college and career group that she was going to. And I'm like, yeah, sure. I mean, I'll give it a go. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? And, so I started going, and yeah, everyone was super, super nice. I mean, obviously they're like Christian and, keen and nice, and everything's dandy. And yeah, they were great people. And at one point, I guess maybe I'd been in that group for about, 6 months. And there was someone who came to speak at our meeting, and they started talking about how there was this trip that they're trying to get people to go on. It was a mission trip to Gambia in Africa. And they're trying to get some people interested in going on this trip. And, again, I wasn't super like churchy, if you will. But it sounded like something totally crazy and random, and something that I would never do. And at that point, I mean, I guess I was 18 at that time. I felt a bit, I don't know. I was never the person to do anything crazy or just, out of the blue. I was very, I like my routines. I like to play it safe and all that stuff. But at the same time, I also knew that I didn't want to live a life of regret. I didn't want to live a life that was too sheltered or boring, quite honestly. I knew like there was an adventurous side of me, but I was just kind of terrified to kind of let it go free, if you will. And so when this person came to talk to us, in my mind, I'm like, what would be super crazy is if I went to Africa. Like, that is the last thing I would ever do. Come on. And of course, with that kind of stuck in my mind, I'm like, maybe I should actually go. Like, why not? And so I looked kind of more into it, and there was one other guy from that group who was for sure going. And so I kind of told him, like, I'm thinking about going, but I don't know, like, that just seems a bit, crazy to me. And, there's a lot of preparation involved and fundraising and all this kind of stuff. And he really encouraged me. He's like, if you want to go, you should, do it. Like, what's holding you back? And so I'm like, okay, fine. And at that point, I was lucky enough to have gotten a full scholarship for my first year of university, but I was still working. So I actually had saved up quite a bit of money. I mean, relatively speaking, obviously. So I actually could afford the trip. I mean, I still had to fundraise because I didn't want to spend all of my savings, but yeah, I'm like, well, there's really no reason I shouldn't go to, go on this experience. It's just, try something totally new. And it was, was supposed to be for a good cause. We're going to go to this place and, supposedly help people. And I always want to like help. Obviously, like there's this part of me that's like kind of the helper. I always want to try to like fix things and help people, even if it's to the detriment of me, which is a whole other story. But so I ended up signing up, and me and him, like, we did this whole fundraising party. I just remember there was a lot of pies. I had to order a lot of pies, and we served pie, and we, fundraised, several $1000s so we could both afford to go on the trip. And and so I still remember this, like it was yesterday. It was, I think, the night before the trip, and I had packed everything. I did my research. I was completely completely prepared as much as I could be anyway. And in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? Why am I going to Africa? It's not necessarily the safest place. I don't really know much about it. I don't know anyone who's been there. And I started just really freaking out and really want to like call in sick for the whole trip, be like, oh, sorry, I can't make it. Don't feel well. But I knew, I'm like, no, that's not the way to live. You need to just conquer those fears because you never know what'll happen if you actually just do it. And so got over that, somehow made it to the airport, got on the plane, and I went there, and it was me and this other guy from Vancouver that I went with. And then there was the majority of people were from Saskatchewan. And and I don't know how many people there were, maybe 10 to 15. It was a pretty small group. And we went to Gambia. And if anyone's interested in where Gambia is, and of course, you probably haven't heard of it, it is the smallest country in Africa. It is near Senegal. And it is the majority of people that live there are, they speak English, but I think they have other national languages, whereas in Senegal, like the majority of people speak French. But it's also like, I think at the time, it was like 90% of the population were practicing Muslims. However, it's a country that was open to any religion. There was no, you weren't going to get in trouble if you were practicing another religion. And so that was a bit of a, okay, that's weird, but okay, I'm just going to go with it. And so we get there, and it took me about a week to acclimatize. It was just so hot. I was just exhausted the whole first week, and also homesick and freaking out. And lots of the people were just so different than me. I mean, my thinking was like, I'm going to go on this trip. I'm going to go to a crazy country would never think of ever going, and would probably never go again. And like, I wanted to help people. That's why I went there. That's why I spent a bunch of my money and fundraised a bunch of other people's money and, took their donations. It was so I can go to this country and help and do some good in the world. That was my thinking. A little naive, looking back, but we'll get to that later. Anyway, so we get there, and I, start talking to the rest of the group, trying to make friends and everything. And I realized they are very, very different than me. As a Catholic, we are... It's just very different than Protestantism. In my experience, Catholics are very traditional but quiet. Like if you go to a mass, it's like there's no talking at all. Whereas in a Protestant church, there's lots of singing and talking and movement, and you can express yourself openly. Whereas in Catholics, it's a little bit more subdued. So talking to, and also it's like, I went to like catechism and all that stuff, but still, we didn't really, I don't know, again, my experience, we don't really talk about faith that much, or like use lots of the words that I think some of the Protestant people on the trip talked about, like, finding Jesus and your faith and buzzwords like that. I'm like, I don't know where that's coming from. I've never heard that. And I've been going to church all these years, and I've never heard of any of these isms, And so there was definitely like some acclimatizing to this whole different thinking of, talking about religion and thinking about religion. And, they're very much into like reading the Bible and, quoting passages. And I'm like, I can't tell you anything off the top of my head. I did, learn about the teachings and stuff, but we didn't like memorize passages. That wasn't like part of our catechism class. So I couldn't tell you. I can tell you, I can recite Hail Mary, but I can't tell you what happened in John 14:11 or something. Anyway, so that was a bit of okay, this is freaky. I definitely miss home. But eventually I did get to know everyone really well, and, opened myself up to them, and just kind of, I don't know, became friends. And I after that, and it was only a 2-month trip. And I, remained friends with quite a few of them for many years afterwards. And I'll tell you, I don't know if I mentioned this prior, but I was 18. So this trip was in the year 2005. So, and it's 2015 now. So that's 10 years ago. That's kind of crazy. This happened a decade ago, but I still remember it as if it happened yesterday. Anyway, so, I kind of went into this trip thinking it was going to be this wonderful opportunity for me to help, but looking back, it wasn't exactly what I thought it would be. And this is why I have this perspective now that I don't personally agree with mission trips. I don't think they are as helpful as a lot of other programs out there. And again, I also kind of thought, I don't know why I would think differently, but at the time I thought we were going there to, I don't know, put some wells in or help at some orphanages and, kind of like hands-on things. But a lot of it was evangelism, which again, as a Catholic, that's not really part of my vocabulary. My experience is just, we go to church, we do all kind of the ceremonial things, but we don't go out preaching. Like preaching is not a thing we do. We kind of keep that to ourselves. But whereas like lots of the Protestants I was with, like that's kind of the whole, and honestly, that was the whole point of the mission, was to go and preach and evangelize and to hopefully convert people, which again, looking back, I'm like, I don't agree with that. And I kind of went in with my eyes, I didn't really know what I was getting myself into, but yeah, it is what it is. Live and learn, right? So I was there for 2 months and I did do a few hands-on things. I did kind of volunteer at this one orphanage, and so I helped feed these, kids at lunch every day for maybe a couple of weeks. And it was actually pretty heartbreaking because there was a lot of kids there, and none of them had parents, and they had to live in this orphanage. So that was really tough as an 18-year-old to, understand and comprehend. But if I could say, what did I do? What did I accomplish on this trip? Well, hopefully I did some good by volunteering for a couple of weeks there, but looking back, I don't know if I actually did any good. Like I spent thousands of dollars to get to Africa, and then I came back and I'm like, I definitely had a different perspective for a little bit when I came back home to Canada, realizing that materials aren't that important. What's important is the people that you love, that, the family that you have in your life. And so and I've always kept that kind of perspective, for these past 10 years since my trip. But otherwise, looking back, what did I do with those thousands of dollars on that trip? I can't say that I really did much. And that's, hard and upsetting, but it is what it is. So if any of you are thinking on going on a mission trip, hey, that is your journey. That's your personal experience. Do what you want. But I couldn't necessarily say that is a good use of money, resources. If you want to help people, there's a lot of different avenues you can go into. So, and this kind of brings me to my next experience with charity. So what I currently do in my life is I make sure to set aside a portion of my money. Some people call that tithing, but it's just I'm putting away some money, a percentage every year, and then I choose a charity that kind of means something to me, or I just it really speaks to me, or it seems like a good cause and a good organization. And then I donate that money to that organization. And I actually did write a blog post about this, which I'll include in the show notes. And it was that there is in Canada, I'll try to look into this for the States, but there is a website on the government website where you can find out, if you're interested in donating for some money to a specific charity, you can find out if that charity is actually a good charity, if it's credible, and also where their money goes. If you donate money, where do all their donations go? Is it mainly administrative costs, or does it go to certain programs? Does it go to education? And so I think I'll include that in the show notes, because I think it's actually really important that you know those details before you ever give an organization money. All right, so that's what I've been doing for the past several years. I do my research, and then I choose a charity, and then I donate some money to that charity. But when I first finished university and moved out on my own, I was really interested in getting a sponsor child. Now, the reason that I wanted to get a sponsor child was, kind of twofold. So I felt like at that time, like I just seen so many commercials, and it just kind of built up, and all those, you see a child in kind of a war-torn country, and, for only $5 a day or whatever, you can help this child, or maybe it's $1 a day or whatever. And then also at that time, my older sister she got a sponsored child, and I think my mom also had one. And so, they enjoyed the experience. It isn't that much money. So I thought, you know what, I'll look into what organization would work for me and do it. And I was definitely kind of like wary of some of them, like World Vision. I just kind of my personal, I feel like there's just too much money put into marketing and advertising. And that personally bugs me. I feel like, it's really expensive to make those commercials and have them on cable networks. It just didn't really sit right with me. So the organization I chose was called Compassion Canada. And it was one that my older sister, got her sponsored child through, and she, kind of did a bunch of research and told me about it. And so I, trusted her opinion, but I also liked that, there was the opportunity if, the child grows up and you've been having this kind of pen pal relationship for all these years, you were able to connect with them and, visit them once they're done the program, which I kind of just liked. It could have been like a little fantasy thing, but I liked the idea of being able to visit them and kind of see, oh, great. I'm glad that you did get, my money and that you did get an education and you're doing okay. Which also kind of sits weirdly with me because it almost feels like, I know I'm weird with charity. Sometimes I'm like, that whole idea of you shouldn't feel good or you shouldn't feel like you should be getting anything out of charity. Charity isn't about you. It is about helping out someone else, and you shouldn't, expect anything in return. But again, with a sponsored child, sometimes it is a bit of a, you want to feel good that you're doing it. You want to, get their photos and make sure that they're doing well. I don't know if that's selfish or not selfish. I'm a bit confused on that front, but that's just me. Anyways, so I visited the Compassion Canada website, and how you choose a sponsored child on this website, and it may be similar for other organizations, is there's kind of a list of childs that you can choose, and you can see a little description about them, where they live and what they need and all that stuff, and some background, and then you choose the one you want, which is also kind of a weird thing because it kind of feels like online shopping, which is like, that's kind of weird, but I don't know how else they would have, they can set it up, quite honestly. You have to choose somebody, but maybe it would be better if they just chose someone for you. But anyways, so I, kind of just looked through some description. I chose a young girl, and I was a sponsor for her for about a year. And, it was fine. I did write her a few letters, and she wrote me back, and that was interesting, but also kind of strange because I didn't really know how to respond to her because we were living such different lives and she was young. And so I was more just like asking her questions like, what's your favorite color? How are you? Stuff like that. And the reason it ended was I got a letter from Compassion Canada saying that she no longer needed a sponsor. And I called them to make sure everything was okay, because God forbid anything actually like terrible happened to her. I couldn't imagine, sponsoring a child and, the worst happens and, they pass away or something like that. And so I made sure to call to make sure what the specific reasoning was. And they couldn't tell me specifically, but they said most likely it was because one of her parents got a well-paying job and they didn't need the financial assistance anymore. So I'm hoping that is the reason. But after that, I considered getting another one, but I don't know. I just thought, as much as, I hope I did help this person, I think I just felt a little bit strange feeling that connected. Of course, I want to help people. I want to use my money so it's not just helping me, it's helping someone else. But I almost felt a little bit too personally connected, if that makes sense. And again, that's just maybe a weird quirk of mine. So after I did that, I kind of like, I don't know if I'll do that again. And so after that, I kind of, said, okay, the way I'm going to be giving back is a couple different ways. I'm always going to give kind of a lump sum that I save up throughout the year to a particular organization that I feel passionate about or I really like. And then I'll also give back in my time. So one of the things I've done it was a couple of years ago now, but there's the YMCA, but there's also the YWCA, and there's a really great program in Vancouver through the YWCA, and I'll include some more information in the show notes, because I think, women, working women, if you want to give back, you want to volunteer, but you don't really know what to do, this is an awesome program that I actually found out through my mom. And it's basically you're a mentor to a high school student, and it's not exactly like a kind of big brother, big sister thing where they come from a certain background and they need guidance because they don't really have an adult figure, but it's more for kids who are in high school that want to go to post-secondary, but they may not actually have like an older sibling or someone that's been through that, and so they need some guidance in that respect. And it's only a 9-month commitment. You only have to meet them once a month and do activities with them. And so, you talk a lot about like what should they expect when they, go to post-secondary? What should they expect when they, graduate and get a real job and have to move out and everything? But it's also just for you to be a good role model for them. And so, I really got a lot out of it because, I was lucky enough to have an older sister who was 3 years older than me. And so I was able to kind of look into the future for 3 years and be like, okay, I know what to expect when I graduate high school. I know what to expect after graduating university and then getting my first job, because she always did it first. And so I kind of had that guidance. And then I, did the same thing for my younger sister. Obviously, it is difficult to find the time to volunteer. I do sometimes feel like giving your time and your effort and just being hands-on can be a bit more valuable than just, writing a check, but it is obviously sometimes, impossible to find that extra time. But that being said, I think no matter what you do, what kind of way, you choose to give back, it is important to kind of budget that. I think it's important to budget giving back, in your finances. It's, obviously very important to save for yourself, but, let's be honest, we're not all in this world alone. We're living with millions of other people, and lots of those people, didn't have the same opportunities as most of us, especially most of you listening who are, fortunate enough to have some kind of device or computer that allows you to listen to podcasts. Most people, lots of people, just don't even have access to the internet. So I think we need to always kind of be mindful of that and, try our best to give what we can, because I think every little bit matters, even if you don't think it does. I know it does. It really does. So on that note, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you so much for listening to my experience. It's kind of a story that I've wanted to express for a while. I have written some blog posts about it, but sometimes I do feel like, I just want to just tell you in my voice, like you're sitting right next to me. It's just one of those things. And so I'm hoping that you like this episode, because I'm definitely going to do another episode like this in another 10 episodes, kind of near December. And that episode is going to be about my experience in post-secondary, because I am a, millennial money blogger and podcaster. And so I kind of want to dig into my experience as a millennial going to post-secondary, because there's a lot of people going through the whole thing, getting student loan debt, getting a degree, and then realizing, hey, what the heck? I was promised, a certain lifestyle, and it's just not happening. And so I kind of want to give my 2 cents about that and my experience with, graduating right around the time the recession was in full swing. So again, thank you so much for listening. For the show notes for this episode, make sure to visit momoneymohouses.com/20. And for every episode that I've done up until now, visit momoneymohouses.com/podcast, and feel free to get in touch with me. Tell me what you're thinking. Do you like this podcast? Do you like this episode? Do you have a really interesting story about this topic or other topics I've covered so far? I'd love to know. Please, you can email me, jessica@momoneymohouses.com, or you can tweet me. And yes, I did just actually recently change my Twitter handle. It is at Jessie _Moorhouse. So that's JESSIE Moorhouse, or just search me, Jessica Moorhouse. I'm the one